good evening, and welcome to our first program for the year 2023, live from region number 2. I am Sherwin Holder, Member of Parliament and Chairman of the People's National Congress Reform, and so I will be your usual host, and I have a guest tonight, lots of things to discuss. And so I would just ask that you take a second to share the live stream, share it on your social media platforms, WhatsApp, Facebook. A number of persons would have been reaching out to me over the last 20, 30 minutes, asking me to share the link. It tells that there is a general expectation. People are tuning into this program. They're gaining something from this program. And so it feels good. Feels good to me that people are following and that you can provide the level of information that people need, level of service that people need in our society today. So just go ahead, guys, and share the live. I'm just checking for some comments. Oh, we have a number of persons that are already tuned in. Good night to Miss Tessa Smith, Stacy Stoll, Rowena Cummins, my friend. Best wishes for 2023. I know it has been a tough year in 2022, and from the way things are going now, it seems as though it will be a even tougher year in 2023. So we're here on this live tonight to have a discussion. It's regionally centered, so we must cover something in region number 2. I've been up and about during the Christmas and after. We are now in the second week, and there are lots of issues here in region 2 and lots of issues across the country. So just share the live, folks. Good night, Lorraine Beats. Good night to you. Miss Ward, good evening. Pittman, Wilson, Gloria Wilson, Linda Thomas. Yes, Happy New Year, Linda. Best wishes for 2023. Folks, just share the live. We are extremely late tonight, and I must apologize for being late tonight. We usually start at 6:30, but we had some technical difficulties uploading some of the info. So we'll nevertheless have a fruitful discussion. My guest tonight is no stranger to this program, and I know that we will have fruitful discussions tonight. The main topic is budget 2023, the general expectations. And so shortly we will get into that. But we're a bit late, so I want to get straight into the program. I want to just wish everyone a happy new year and best wishes once again for 2023. And just say thank you for tuning in during the period in 2022 when we would have restarted this program. And I'm happy to see so many of you again in 2023 for our first program, ready to tune in, ready to contribute. As I promised last year, we will develop this program. I'm working on several things to develop the program. That call-in feature, we'll work on that shortly. And there's several segments of this program that I want to work on. One of them is to have a community in focus. Every week, we look at a specific community. During my outreach, I would visit communities, and so we will try to zero in on at least one of those communities, speak with the residents, have my counselors also, our APNU and AFC counselors also there, and other activists within those communities. So that is something that I want to develop. Our counselors have got to be on the ground. There's a lot of talk about our MPs, And I would accept that we all have to play our part. Our MPs need to be out more, out and about, and fighting this battle. But at the same time, we need the assistance from our councillors. We need the assistance from our activists, our party members. This thing is not about Aubrey Norton and the central executive, the leaders at the top alone. It is about you and your activism, even within your community. Ultimately, it is you, the people, who will make that difference. We are here to give leadership and we have our work cut out, but it is the people who will bring about the change. And so for 2023, I want to ask each and every one of us here, and we should also speak to our friends, speak to our neighbors, speak to our family about contributing and playing that role to hold government feet to the fire and to bring about the change that we so want to see within our communities, within our region, and within our country as a whole. So I want to get straight into some of the topics. Obviously, tonight I will be unable to touch everything within Region 2 and all that I wanted to focus on because time is against us due to the late start. But I want to get straight into the PPP's attitude that they've brought into 2023. We've seen their attitude in 2020 when they took over government. We've seen their corruption. We've seen their discrimination throughout the remainder from August 2020 to December 2020. We've seen what they have done, what they would have done through 2021 and 2022. And I can say this to you, 2022 has been a disastrous year. It has been probably one of the toughest years for Guyanese in recent times, and Guyanese of all walks of life. Afro Guyanese have seen the brunt, has faced the brunt of their assault, but also Indo Guyanese who are not supportive of them, and even those that are supportive of them within various communities that we would have visited, they have not really benefited from our national patrimony and all the funds that has been coming in and all the development that this government continues to claim. Indo Guyanese have also been suffering under this government, and our indigenous brothers and sisters, of course, are still, to my mind, at the bottom of the table and remain at the bottom of the table. Our first people, there is a general lack of employment within the indigenous communities, a lack of opportunity. And so it brings to mind what exactly is happening with our oil money and this newfound wealth and all these promises that this government has made prior to taking office. They would have withdrawn most of the oil money, at least about 75% of the oil money that they would have received between 2020 and at least 2020, 2021, and I think 2022. They would have withdrawn at least about 75% of that money, I'm certain. For last year, they withdrew, I believe, is $127 billion. And this year, they are going to withdraw much, much more money than that. And so the question is where exactly these monies have been going. Now, I want to just put that conversation on pause until I bring my guests in. But quickly, I want to pull up our first slide and just deal with some regional issues very, very quickly, and then bring on the program, my guest, so that we can have that budget discussion. So operator, if you can bring up, okay, so it's on the screen. Would have had some persons, some of our councillors and reps visit the Sparta Primary. It's not very far from where I am living. And there is a general complaint there that bats would have taken over sections of the school, and the teachers have been complaining. Several letters would have been written to the ministry, and nothing seems to be happening there. And so parents and teachers have been reaching out to me as the regional MP, and so I am putting this out there so that the regional administration can address this as quickly as possible. You know, this kind of lackluster layback attitude from this administration, the regional administration in Region 2, that we would have observed in the last 2.5 years since the PPP took over. I'm not saying that these things were not happening during the APNU AFC time, but they were dealt with expeditiously. You had an RU there who was a no-nonsense person, and quickly those issues would have been addressed, or somebody's feet would have been over the coals. And so I want to press on the regional administration to deal with that immediately. Operator, if you can move to the other slide. If you can move quickly to the other slide. I just want to speak on a few of the regional issues very, very quickly. And so these photos, I actually took them today. And this is at the Anne Regina, the two secondary schools in the in Anne Regina, the Cottonfield Secondary and Multilateral, which is the Anne Regina Multilateral School, which is amongst the top performing schools for several years now. Within in this country, they've produced a number of top students. Even at the last exam, I think is a number of persons would have placed in. I think they had number one and two, and several other top students there. Now, this facility was built by the APNU AFC administration. It is a little sort of a park, a relaxing area, an area where students, teachers, you have the Ministry of Education building. You can see it in the bottom left pic there. You can see to the right of it, you can see the Ministry of Education building there, and other buildings. This is a very big compound, and this initiative was taken under the APNU AFC administration, and it is just left. It is just left just like that. You know, instead of successive governments developing on what others before them would have done, this is what you get from them. And this reminds me of Durban Park, the way how they would have treated with Durban Park project. It's the same thing they're doing in all the regions. Whatever projects the APNU AFC embarked on, they just leave it. And so they can make that claim later on that, you know, this is a white elephant. Barra Jagdeo and the PPP would have embarked on a number of white elephants. And so this is their response. This is their response. You know, this facility can simply be used, simply be developed. Put a shed maybe over it. You have benches there. The idea is that you have some nice palm plants and some other thing that beautify the area, and you have like a waiting area. There's several canteens and shops there where children go and buy during the lunchtime. And then when they come out of school to wait for their parents, you have vehicles lining up there. So they have somewhere, they could have had a decent place, a tidy place to sit and wait on their parents. But instead, you know, this is what the regional administration has done in region number 2. So we will come back to this. I really want to get into the budget discussion. But quickly, I will deal with 2 more issues. And the pictures you're seeing there, these few right here. This one is a road at the back of Better Success. And what you're seeing to the right of it is a canal, and that leads to the sea. That goes out through the coca to the sea. So the seawall is just far to the right there. Now go back, operator. Now, so that was done in a PPP stronghold, better success. Now, when you go to the other picture, and this is my issue here, just rotate, just go to the next pic. Now, this is the same street, just separated by a canal, by a perpendicular canal to the one that you're seeing there. This is the same area to the seawall. Now, this is in Westbury, at the back of Westbury. And Westbury, in recent times, has been supporting the coalition. You have a lot of poor people living. You can see some of the houses there, but you have a lot of poor people living in this area, and they support the APNU AFC or the PNC specifically. And so this government has been refusing to to do any works whatsoever on this road. And I'll tell you this, if you go into the community, I don't have the pictures here, but the access that they have in front, it is too small for trucks to go in to take sand or mud or whatever to the people's yard. It is too small for the fire service. If you have a fire, if a fire only emerges within that little community there of Westbury, then there is no way for the fire service to access the area to deal with that fire. It's they will have to go through several yards to try to get to those people. So at the NDC level, the excuse that they are giving to our councillors is that this project cannot be handled by the NDC, but it falls under the jurisdiction of DNI. DNI has control. But my question is, isn't DNI in control of the road that you just saw? The other half of the road at Better Success, where you have mostly PPP supporters? You know, this nonsense has got to stop. This is the same road. This is the same road. The only difference is that it is separated by a canal. It's from village to village, and villages are separated by canals, normally in the country area. So this is the kind of behavior, this is the kind of one Guyana we get from this PPP government. You know, and I will continue to expose this kind of thing. I can't spend too much time on it. These are persons living, it's the same road, people living, so I just had some snapshots there. Now, this is the next project that I want to talk on, and I had it, I spoke on it before, and I'm bringing it up again because on my visit to Westbury, youths reach out to me. I had a discussion with maybe about 24 youths, and their primary concern was this play field. Now, APNU AFC place lights, we develop, we full this ground, just roll back, we full the ground, we place lights so that games can be played in the nights, we develop the pavilion, washroom facility, etc. And this is the condition for the last 6 to 8 months. This is the condition that this play field is in. And our councillors have been fighting to get this thing done, all sorts of excuse the administration is giving. And, you know, the buck stops at Irfan Ali. If when we were in government, they knew they were telling their NDC chairs and instructing them what to do and what not to do, instructing them not to attend any consultation, etc. And so they cannot be absolved from the blame here that is happening at the NDC level. It's a plain case of discrimination, a plain case of spitefulness. And this is what we have in region number 2. There are other grounds that have been developed. There are other areas that attention is being given to. Why is it that they cannot maintain this project that APNU AFC would have done for the betterment of the people of Westbury? Is it because in recent times Westbury has been supportive of the APNU AFC government? That is the key question. Operator, if you can move quickly, I'll only deal with okay, I think I should get straight into the budget discussion because we only have another half hour before another program starts, and I also have another engagement. And so I just wanted to highlight that. Good night, Miss Stoby. Thanks for being on the program again from Kaitumo. I will get straight into our budget discussion. And so without further ado, I want to welcome our guests, my friend, my colleague, and a comrade of the PNCR, advisor, advisor, economic advisor, and also youth policy advisor to the leader of the opposition, Elson Lowe, who is no stranger to region number 2 and no stranger to this program. Is a young, vibrant person. And Elson, I just wanted to give you that introduction.
Yeah, thank you. That's an energetic introduction, man. Much appreciated.
I trust that all is well. Thanks for coming again on this program. Sorry for being so late. We had so many technical difficulties, but you and I are here, and the feedback that I get from persons, they like the kind of discussion, especially young people. We are both young in this political arena. And so, from a young people's perspective, or rather, we can give our perspective from that angle. And I think a lot of young people and even the older folks are tuning into this program and like what they see and hear from us here on this program. So we're discussing budget 2023. But before we get to budget 2023, I think that there are a few things that we should say to the public, a few things that we should comment on 2022. We've just completed 2022. It would have been the largest budget ever in the history of our country. It would have also, and in saying the largest budget at the time of
Yeah,
when the budget was presented. And then that budget continued to grow through the government returning to parliament and basically approving using their one seat majority to approve without much questions being answered, without providing the necessary answers. Huge sums. So that when we said it was the biggest budget, I believe it was in February. And from February to December, they went back to the National Assembly at least 2 to 3 times. Um, Tens of billions of dollars added. Um, what?
yeah. Just about 90
What?
billion in supplementals.
Okay, go ahead. Go ahead.
Well, when you look at it all told, the national budget for last year was about 50% larger than the previous year's budget. So that's including the main budget, including the supplementals, which was about 90 billion. And then the main budget was it 500 and something billion. So quite substantial sums. Now, that budget, while being big, if you ask Guyanese if they feel that they got 50% more from the government last year, I think many of them would say that that is not at all the case, and that they don't have any idea of where these monies even went, because it is not that the government spent 10% more, 20% more, 50% more is a lot more to spend. I think anyone would agree on that particular front. However, what I would say is, now that we've seen the government spend a large budget, and we've seen that we're not really getting or feeling the effects of such large spending, we have to ask what is going to happen with this next budget. What we also should keep in mind about last year is that we had really a period of artificial suffering created because, on the one hand, yes, there was high inflation, high cost of living, but really we saw that the government refused to take the excess funds that it had made. We'll recall that about $60 billion in excess revenue the country was able to get due to the higher oil price. The government refused to put that directly towards cost of living relief. Excuse me, I have a bit of a cold. We actually had indicated that 60 billion, which is around 300,000 per household, should be directly distributed to various households to assist them in the cost of living crisis. Now, as we've not seen that, the 60 billion is still somewhere. The question is, what is the government's intention to do with those funds? Are we going to see them in this new budget? Are we going to see those funds distributed in the way that we've described, which is the 300,000 per household? Or are we going to see it go towards infrastructure projects that it's very unclear we're going to actually see any progress or any value come from them? One thing that I think is useful to point out to
Mm-hmm.
viewers actually is,
Kelson,
yes. Are you hearing me
go
or?
ahead, go ahead, go ahead. I'll come in after.
One thing I think is useful to point
Yes,
out to
yes, go
viewers
ahead. I'll come in after.
is this. And it's something that you should really reflect on, viewers. We've seen really the state of the roads in this country is terrible. Potholes everywhere, too numerous to count. In the last 2 months of the year, the government claims to have spent $18 billion on upgrading roads and drains. If they spent this $18 billion on upgrading roads and drains, what happened to all these potholes? Why are there so many potholes? This is what we talk about when we say value for money. Where is the money going? It makes no sense to be spending.
Precisely.
Exactly.
If you can stick a pin right there, operator, just pull up that next slide with the roads with the potholes in Charity. Now, and it links into exactly what I was going to interrupt to say. There seemed to be a problem in 2022, 2021, and even 2020 for the remainder of 2020 when the PPP took office. They seem to have an implementation problem. They talk the talk. They definitely talk the talk. They talk about a lot of projects. I see them, Ejil, talking about 1,200 roads for 2023. We'll get to that just now. He spoke about 1,000 roads in 2022. But have we seen 1,000 roads being developed? Have we seen them? And if they were they properly done? That is another question that we can ask. Now, if the operator can pull up the slide there, it was the next slide, you would see on the Charity Public Road in region number 2, the amount of potholes. And mind you, they bragged and they boasted that of spending tens of millions of dollars. If I recall correctly, probably about 60 to 80 million dollars to rehabilitate the main thoroughfare. And shortly after, just months later, we are seeing potholes left, right, and center on the main road. The operator seemed to be having a little problem with it, but you can bring it up at any time during the conversation. My information says to me in region 2 specifically, they would have, I'm not sure what you call it, the performance indicator though, PSIP, I think is that, but it's under 50%. It's
Yeah.
under 50%. And so they are talking the talk. They are telling you all about these projects that will come on stream. Listen, in region 2, they promised a hospital. $2 billion they had. Remember, they had that big fanfare with the PPP flag leaving out the green when they unveiled it, right? That we're yet to see that. This is region 2 specific I'm talking about. Not the whole country, just region 2. You had in 2020 the indoor stadium for youths, which made youths become it made the youths very excited to know that they will be getting an indoor stadium. Mind you, it was an APNU project, APNU conceptualized project. Not a stone has been torn for that. They promised jobs in the form of a cement factory. And when I posted it, and I had some comments, some persons were critical of my comments. Well, the mangroves have been removed, and there is yet to be any progress there or anything whatsoever. So they continue to make all these lavish promises, and nothing really comes out of it. I will tell you this last one, and this is not so much financial as a tangible project. but they would have promised the fisher folks here in Region 2 and across the country that they would have gotten some space in the Suriname waters or in the quarantine area for them to fish. And since Ali announced that, from then to now, it cannot materialize. Now, what I'm seeing coming is that the fisher folks will have to pay in excess of 5,000 US dollars or over $1 million to to be permitted to fish there. And then there's another condition where they would have to sell their produce right there in Trinidad. Now, before Ali made this intervention, the fisher folks are claiming that they had to pay 3,000 US. And that is why they would have complained in the first place. Now, when Ali made his intervention, it gone up now to 5,000 US. I saw the comment from one fisher folk, and I don't want to. I have it on the card there, but I don't want to bring it up because of time. But the guy basically saying, well, now our livelihood is finished. We have to look for something else because we were complaining for 3,000 US. Ali goes over to Suriname and comes back with 5,000 US, almost doubling the fee that they have to pay.
Because
And offer something.
some would say it's best he didn't involve himself at all because he's made the situation
Best you
worse.
just shut up and stay in his corner. Aubrey
Yeah,
Norton explained to the private sector, and I got angry with Jerry Govaya the other day, and he had to call me, and we had a bit of exchange because I saw him saying that Aubrey should Aubrey should stop talking about discrimination and should put forward his party's policies, etc. I said to him, I said, isn't that what we have been doing? I said to him, when we had that meeting with you guys at the private sector, you guys were so impressed. And I'm speaking about this because Aubrey mentioned that same fishing issue. He mentioned that same fishing issue because that was something that the private sector was interested in. And Aubrey explained why the process that Irfan embarked on was not the correct one and one which would not have worked. And so I'm just mentioning that for the viewing public. So when you see these comments from these people, you know where they are. You understand me? And so getting back to the point though, coming back to the point, they have they talk a lot on these projects, and that is all we get. At the end of the year, they're under 50% performing, and I don't know what has happened across the country, but in Region 2, they have doubled up the projects. They had 120 roads in the original budget. They're performing under 50% for that. And they still go ahead and approve another 120 roads. And so I don't know where we're going or where the money has gone in 2022. But so we'll have
yeah,
to
absolutely.
certainly have a
Yeah.
closer look in budget 2023 and exactly where they're going with
Well,
it.
as you're indicating, they first of all are struggling to spend the money. Second of all, when they do spend the money, it seems that the roads are falling apart in no time. And then third of all, they're coming back to Parliament for additional funds, even though they weren't able to clear the first group of funds, which is already by itself quite suspicious. That is in the area of roads, but there's so many other areas. When you look at education, can you imagine that the government has spent last year nearly double the amount that we spent in a single budget on education? Of course, you'll recall that our budgets were before oil funds were available, so they would indeed have been smaller. But is the pass rate in mathematics and so on anything to be proud of? You still had a 34% pass rate, and the year before you had a 31% pass rate in math at CSEC. And so, as much as the government is looking to chuck out all these funds, there's a difference between spending and results. There's no point in spending twice as much on education if you can't improve critical results like math. There's no point in that. And that is what you're seeing across the board. When you look at drugs, the provision of medication for the from the pharmaceutical industry for our healthcare system. You've seen again, huge sums of drugs of pharmaceuticals that have not actually been delivered when it is that they're supposed to be delivered, so that they cannot actually be used. This is the type of thing
Yeah,
where
yeah,
the government's budget
and
really, I think, kind of
yeah.
misleads the Guyanese population as to what is going on in the country.
Yeah, certainly, certainly. I'm happy that you brought up health because something that struck me during the last quarter of 2022, and even as we venture into 2023, I have noticed that the maternal deaths have greatly increased. And so, with all this spending, there seems not to be a focus on dealing with these fundamental issues. APNU spent less money, had less because we have obviously had less money at our disposal, but those are the critical issues that we would have we would have dealt with. All Guyanese would accept that the maternal deaths would have been lowered during our time, and now there seems to be an acceleration of maternal deaths again. What is
Yeah, well,
really happening?
those are the types of simple things that are key development measures. Your number of maternal deaths, key development measures. And if you can't get that right, it makes you think that the entire system and the many other areas that they're spending money, they're not going to be able to get things right. That I think is pretty critical here. And so now we're going to see a budget perhaps 20% larger than last year's budget. Let's see. Where we have to ask ourselves, are we going to see more of the same? Now, it is important also to note, and this is where Guyanese have to prick their ears up, that the World Bank has estimated Guyana's growth will be 25% this year. Huge amount of growth. So we've had 40% growth, 20% growth, 60% growth. Now we're having 25% growth over the past several years. That is, I'm sure that you would agree, quite a lot of growth. We cannot anticipate that going into the next budget, we're going to see the same performance. The country's budget, the country's GDP is far more than double the size that it was only a few years ago. This year, as we've mentioned at our press conferences, we're actually going to surpass Trinidad in per capita GDP. Now, if you have more money per person than Trinidad, how can you as a country accept the same sorts of foolishness we used to see before we had oil?
Precisely, precisely. And you know that is the question. All Guyanese at the back of the minds of all Guyanese. When you visit the marketplace, the prices just seem to be going up. The government seems to think differently. They're on this media overdrive, this what do you call it, overdrive in trying to put out this kind of propaganda. All is bright and beautiful, things are not so bad in this country. But when it comes to food and the cost of living, I think that is the most critical issue on the minds of all Guyanese, because it affects all of us. When you go out to the market, you any basic thing you gotta spend $500 or more. Any basic thing, and that is at a minimum. If you're gonna buy a parcel of boro or whatever basic vegetable, it is $500, and that is basically for a 3 person, 2 to 3 person, um,
Sure, when
uh,
I have a
living
laugh
in
for
a
you.
living in a home. If you
I have
have
a
an
laugh. I have a laugh for
yeah.
you. What happened to the government's plan to grow wheat in Region 7 to lower the price of flour? What happened to that? That's the
Yeah,
kind of
yeah. Maybe we might see it in this budget.
man.
Maybe we might see it in this budget.
They don't take seriously these types of critical issues. What happened to that? It's been a whole year. You're not hearing, oh, well, we've delivered our first batch of low cost flour or something like that.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
That's because these guys don't
Nelson, it was one of those malicious things that they do.
I mean,
it's one of
we
those malicious things that they do. The
they
people
just
were crying because they know flour is
yeah,
heavy in
yeah,
Indo Guyanese, in all Guyanese, and something like flour is critical because of Hindu, well, not Hindu, but Indo Guyanese, the culture, the type of food that they eat.
yeah,
And so even myself, I am a flour person because
yeah,
I came up pretty much with my mother being Indo Guyanese. And so they knew that, so they had to say something. So the easiest thing to say, you want flour? Cheaper? We'll grow wheat. We'll
yeah.
grow wheat. And that's it.
I mean,
Elson,
it was
I want to
hilarious.
get straight
Hilarious,
into
hilarious. Yeah.
I want to get straight into the expectation um, for 2023. I know you had a press conference, you were on that press conference with the leader, and several things would have been, you would have put out there. If you can just enlighten the public on what is our general expectation for this budget 2023, which obviously will be the largest budget,
Yeah.
yet the largest budget in our history.
Well, we, as in the course of various budget speech and further releases, we'll lay out what it is that we believe the government should include in the budget. But some of the key areas that really we have to keep an eye on is things like, first of all, some public servants were able to receive a substantial increase last year. We've said that across the board, public servants should get the 50% increase that some have received. In particular, teachers have been totally neglected in terms of any substantial increase. We need to see from that budget that type of funding provided to teachers. They need to get a very substantial increase. 50% increase is in order, given the growth of the country and the growth of the budget. And as a result, we will be able to see teachers' lives substantially improve. Of course, the University of Guyana, just to continue on the education theme, should immediately be made free. There is no real excuse now, given that you have all of these vast sums, and we've called for stipends to also go to students, so as to help them to study. Now, in addition to that, we've said that the all student debt needs to be written off immediately. This is just in education. There are a wide range of areas where we will make various pronouncements, whether it's on Gaisuko, whether it's on infrastructure, whether it's on taxation, that will be, to our mind, pretty critical to move the country forward. But what we're seeing right now is a lack of any indication that the government is paying attention to these types of critical issues. Rather, we anticipate a very large infrastructure budget again, and we anticipate some confusion as to where exactly those funds will end up. That is the sad state of affairs. So I expect to see a large infrastructure budget and not to see funds allocated where they really should be.
Why is it that as an economist you're anticipating uh, a budget that would be heavy on infrastructure?
Well, I'll tell you a funny thing. Infrastructure spending is the easiest way for you to steal because you can engage in procurement fraud. Because the government's focus is how quickly and how much they can steal, there's always going to be this heavy focus on infrastructure. Now, that does not mean that we do not think that infrastructure is important, vital, really. But rather, because our focus is on all the different areas where there's a lot that remains to be desired, where there's a lot of improvements that need to be made, we believe that there needs to be a more balanced budget that addresses the various needs of the country. If, however, your focus is on stealing as much as you can, as fast as you can, then infrastructure is the natural place for funds to go.
Yeah, I agree with you. I agree with you 100%. Based on what I've seen, based on what I've seen within the various regions, what has been happening. Um, it is quite clear that it's friends and family and favorites of the government who have been benefiting from these infrastructure projects, and that in itself is causing some issue for them in their performance, their general performance. Because what happens is that you have one person getting so many contracts, and there is only so much equipment that they might have. There's only so much time that they can spend on these projects. So essentially, what you have happening is a slowdown in a number of projects across the various regions, and they must have recognized this. But I believe that they care less. They could care less, because once they can have some kind of drawback on this, once their friends and cronies can benefit, then that is the aim. It is not, their focus is not on the people and on the real development that is needed. Their focus basically is to have this kickback, and so that is why, in my view, they're performing the way they are.
Yeah, absolutely. And as we confront this concerning spending where we're not seeing value for money, where we're not even seeing the results of it, we have to make sure that we, let viewers have this perspective on it. The country is incredibly wealthy, with the second most barrels of oil per person of any country, more than Saudi Arabia, more than Dubai, and all these places, UAE that we're looking at. And yet, we see people living in biting poverty. We see huge budgets being passed and nothing done to address the core issues of things like poverty and inequality in the country. How can this be? It can only be if a government is taking deliberate steps not to address those issues. There are resources available. There are things that can be done.
Yeah.
It's the government's choice not to do it. Yeah, it's the government's choice not to do it.
Elson, 2022, I think 2022, other than us seeing the biggest budget ever in the history of this country, I think the sums that have been borrowed are equally the biggest sums, or the most money we would have ever seen borrowed within a single year. I believe 2022. I don't know if you ever had the opportunity to look at it, and what are your thoughts about that in terms of budget 2023? Because I could tell you this. I think it is what was in 2020 budget or 2021. When you looked at the income and expenditure, there was a huge gap, and we knew straight off the bat when we analyzed it that they had to borrow to fulfill these spendings that they intended, these projects that they intended to do. I don't know if you had an opportunity to look at that, look at the budget from that perspective, and what are
Well,
your
I do know
thoughts
that
in terms of.
recently it was reported that Guyana has currently owes China more than Sri Lanka owes China. Now, those of you viewers who may have been paying attention to these particular issues will know that Sri Lanka is a country that had very serious debt problems recently. So for us to owe China more than them, it means that we owe them a lot. Now, that in of itself is not a bad thing. What really matters is that you're getting value for money, and you're being thoughtful in the way that you go about getting accumulating any debt. As the country grows, of course, we will borrow and so on to fulfill various infrastructure projects, various education projects, various healthcare projects. But what we have to see is value for money. If we don't see value for money, if people don't see significant improvements in their lives, then borrowing becomes instead a bit of a debt trap, because you spent all this money, it's gone, but what is the purpose of spending it? And that, I think, is really where the PVP, I think, has created a real anxiety in the nation, because people are wondering what exactly is going to be the outcome of all of this borrowing. So that is, I think, why there's a bit of trepidation, a bit of fear around that. Of course, we believe that we
Yeah.
will have to finance some government projects and some improvements in that way, but we're all about getting value for money.
Do you foresee a huge chunk, given the debt that we already have? even the debt that we already have. And you made reference to Sri Lanka and the problems that they had, and the fact that we owe China more money than them. Do you foresee the government borrowing an equivalent amount or even more than what they would have borrowed in 2022?
Well, that is very possible, but recall that they have access to even more funds from the Natural Resources Fund, substantially more funds, and so I'm sure that they're going to withdraw as much as they can withdraw to spend. I think where we're going to see some borrowing is the U.S. Guyana Exim Bank, which is, I think, about 2 billion US that is available. I believe there'll probably be some borrowing there. Again, we have to keep in mind, yes, we can borrow, but are we getting value for money? We know that some of the borrowing from the for infrastructure projects like the gas to shore pipeline, we've seen the cost expand from about 300 million to 900 million, easily. And so that again is a question of value for money. Now, we may say that countries rich oil will never run out. Well, I can tell you, if all you're doing is borrowing and frittering the money away and not getting any value for the money, no matter how much money you have, it will eventually run out. And in fact, Venezuela, right next door, actually ended up borrowing so much that China stopped lending them, right? Refused to lend them any more money. And Russia was the only group that was willing to lend them. And in order for them to borrow from them, they had to put up their oil blocks, their offshore oil blocks. We don't want to be getting into that position. If we spend poorly, if we sustain poor spending, which is what looks like we're going to be doing, then we will find ourselves in exactly
Yeah.
that position. That cannot be the future that we leave our children. And as a result, we have to call out wasteful spending wherever we see it and say that spending should be directed in the areas that it should be directed. And that, of course, is things like education and healthcare and so on, in addition to infrastructure.
Yeah, they seem to be banking on the fact that the we have oil, and there's that general expectation that so many barrels will come and so much we will earn. Obviously, counting chickens, we're counting chickens currently, and you know, but not considering even the geopolitics of it, because I continue to explain to people that Venezuela, our neighbor Venezuela, has close to 300 times more oil proven than Guyana. And should anything change in terms of the relationship between the United States and Venezuela, as we would have seen some bit of improvement in their relations recently, then it can change the entire ball game for us here in Guyana. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. It is something that we have to keep an eye on. We have to keep an eye on. Of course, Venezuela has, I think, so run down their oil industry that it's going to take a minute, take a couple of years before they can kind of come back to where they were. And I believe that in a few years, Guyana is expected to actually be producing more oil overall than Venezuela. But we'll see whether they can revive that particular oil industry. What we want to do, though, is to learn from the mistakes of our neighbor. We don't want to go and rehash those same mistakes and have to suffer those same consequences. As a result, when we do borrow, we need to be careful and thoughtful. We need to boost production as we go along, and we need to use those funds well. Venezuela did quite the opposite of that. And as a result, despite having more oil than any other country, they are, in a state of impoverishment.
Elson, finally, because our time has run out so quickly, and we have to continue. We have to continue this discussion, but it would be remiss of me not to briefly have your thoughts on this. Now, we're a nation of 750,000 people, um, mostly impoverished. We've had, one second, we've had our share of problems as a nation. And now that we have found these riches, now we have access to these finances. Don't you think that there is a general expectation that whichever government is in office will work, um, will consult, will cooperate with the opposition and all stakeholders to ensure that the money is properly spent and we don't make the kind of mistakes that other countries would have made, like at Venezuela, some countries in Africa, a small nation. What are your thoughts on it before we close?
Well, I think at heart here is whether the PVP is genuine. Now, one of the things we bring up a lot is the audit of the Exxon's expenses. $7 billion in expenses. Government is supposed to audit to check to see whether or not we're charged what we're supposed to be charged. But the government, to first of all, drag the foot on that to the point that we weren't able to audit anymore. Have to go back to the Exxon to ask them for permission now because the time period elapsed in which we were allowed to audit. To audit. And then actually now to produce an audit, or at least it seems like it may be an audit that doesn't even fulfill what the PSA, what our expectations, what we are legitimately entitled to. It shows that the government doesn't really have, I think, a serious interest in governance in the way that we're talking about governance, making sure that the simple things are taken care of and the country's rights are safeguarded the way that they should be. Rather, they are focused on, as we discussed, stealing everything in sight. And so, while we believe that, and the Guyana Constitution provides for consultation and cooperation, it is difficult for us to imagine that a government that can do a basic thing like check to see whether we're being overcharged on a $7 billion bill, and it's US viewers, not
Yeah,
$7 billion, $7 billion US. If a basic thing like
yeah.
that the government can do, how can we expect them to engage in any other form of good governance going forward?
Yeah, you made a point at the press conference today. You were talking about the oil, the gas pipeline, and the PPP's intention to pay for it through cost oil. Could you expand on that for the sake of the viewers?
Yes, well, the key here is this. They intend to purchase a stake in this pipeline and eventually purchase the entire pipeline based off of cost oil. And what that means is that they're going to take out from our share of the oil the cost of this pipeline. Exxon's going to take that out. Now, the key thing here is that essentially that means they're going to purchase this pipeline. Now, you can't purchase anything without going through Parliament, right? Without going through the National Assembly. That's how things are supposed to work. For them to be spending before funds even reach, first of all, the sovereign wealth fund where all the oil money rests, and then the National Assembly where we actually have budgets passed, is highly problematic. Because what it means is they can now spend on multiple big infrastructure projects before Parliament even has a look at
Yeah,
it. And that is exactly, in fact, what our neighbors, again, we
before
talk
any scrutiny.
before any scrutiny. Our neighbors in Venezuela did the same thing, where they got their oil company to spend on various social programs before they even got to Parliament. And those programs were rife with corruption and waste. That is one of the key reasons that they ran out of money, even though they had more oil than everybody else. We cannot allow this. It is something we need to call out.
Yeah,
It is a very dangerous
yeah.
precedent for the government to be setting.
Yeah, it is something that we need to continue to bang to the people so that they understand what exactly is happening, because these funds are their funds. It is your fund, it is my fund. The fund belongs to the Guyanese people and not the People's Progressive Party. And so we will have to continue this discussion, Elson. There's another program, Sherrod's program, coming up. So I'll give you in 30 seconds your closing remarks, and then we can close the program.
Yes, absolutely. Well, folks, the key thing to have at the top of your mind this year, as we see yet another budget, is this. We are now going to be a country with a higher per capita GDP. That means the economy of Guyana on a per person basis is larger than Trinidad's. I know many of you may have been to Trinidad. I know many of you may have family there. We cannot expect Guyana to remain the same to remain with the same level of performance out of the government with all of these riches at its disposal. We have to demand more from the government. We have to demand different things from the government. We have to see the government deliver a standard of living that makes sense for a country as wealthy as ours. If not, we have to ask ourselves whether this government should remain in office. And as you can see so far, there are very serious questions about their ability to perform.
All right. Thank you, Elson. And with that, it brings us to the end of tonight's program. Folks, I want to say a special thanks to you for tuning in over the last hour. My apologies again for the late start, but thank you nevertheless. And do have a good night. We look forward to you tuning in next week, same time, same place. So do have good night, and I hope that you tune in to the next program coming up shortly. Thank you.